Because Interact is an enterprise system, it allows you to define any number of individual companies or employers, each one of which can have its own HR department and operate entirely separate from all the rest. Even though there is only one single installation and one system deployed, it supports scenarios where all the HR rules are totally different in each company. However, in many cases, there are shared HR services, in which case you would set up everything under a single employer, and you just use your organization structure to define different units, which can be separate legal entities with their own EIN number and tax IDs, and everything can be done in terms of entirely separate reporting. Now, if you want to manage the enterprise level and define rules that apply to all companies, then you could do that as a system manager. And there's a lot you could do there. The system manager level is where all the key rules for the general setup of the system are defined. This is also where you can perform maintenance. You can set up how the email is supposed to work in between Interact users, and you can manage your backup process right here. Interact allows you to do offline replication, as well as do a standard backup and restore of your database. Doing a backup is a simple process in Interact. You just follow the steps and you hit the Proceed button. Backups can be done by a person in HR or can be handled by the IT department depending on how you divide the roles. Backups can also be schedules, so they will be run automatically at a specific time every day. In addition to your backups, you could also set up your user access rights right here, for which you can define user groups. These are user groups that work across all companies, which is different from the user groups that are defined at the employer level. And each user will be assigned to a specific group, which will provide access to certain forms. And we can also select which type of access the employee should have to those specific forms based on the user group that they belong to. We can track the user activities if you have turned on the activity tracking auto trail. In addition to that, we can link multiple user IDs if the employee plays different roles. You can actually define it so that there would be a single user ID login only, and you can define when an employee would be able to access the system. Under General Settings, we have the master tables where you can update the options that typically appear in the system for those variables. Here is an example of a list box which has 3 language options defined: French, German, or English. You even have the German equivalent of that because Interact is a multilingual system that can be used in more than one language. You can even maintain your own translations if you don't like the word that's currently being used. If you want to transfer employees between different employers, with employers being separate companies, which means that they each have their own HR department and pretty much work entirely independently, well, then there's a process where you can set up how the transfer should be handled, who should request the transfer, and what should be the implications of the transfer between 2 different employers. That's called the inter-employer transfer. We can even do that for an entire batch of employees depending on the nature of the business that you are in. Another thing that you can manage in Interact is the menus. As you know, there are menus on the left and there are menus on the top in Interact depending on how you log in. So here we can see what appears for an employee on the left-hand side of their employee's self-service. Now, if you want to remove, for example, My Benefits from the system, then all you need to do is make that menu inactive. Alternatively, you can also change the caption that will show as the menu title, and you can add an icon or modify the icon that is currently being used. So, Interact gives you the ability to change your menus or even add your own menus to the system to make it easier for you to navigate the system. The system also allows you to define your own health forms and to create help that will appear in specific forms or fields, and it will let you handle workflow that needs to be handled at the enterprise level. Again, this is different from the workflow that is done at the employer level, just to be clear. There are many more things that can be done in the System Manager because in the end, this is where the most basic rules of the system will be defined, and these will then cascade down to the individual employers, where they can be modified again.